He blinded himself. Sapi hamin, not as punishment, not as ritual, as consequence. The direct, permanent, irreversible result of using something he was not ready to use in a moment when he had no other choice, to save people who had every reason to wish him elsewhere. He stood in the ruins of what had been a temple. Around him, survivors. Inside him, the knowledge that the fire which had saved them had come from him, and the knowledge that he had not controlled it, and the knowledge that both of these things were true simultaneously, and that the gap between them was the gap he would be spending the rest of his life trying to close. His name is Lee Sin, and the story of how a prodigy became a monk and what it cost him is the story of what happens when exceptional gifts arrive before the character to carry them. New here? Subscribe. Every week, a League of Legends story, told the way it deserves to be, heard. The elders of the Shojin Monastery recognized what he was before he said a word. He came to them as a child, claiming to have been chosen by the dragon spirit, the most powerful and least predictable of Ionia's revered entities, the one the traditions treated with a care that bordered on sacred fear. Some saw in the dragon the embodiment of destruction. Claiming ke kalachol hachatis gomaga haraf to a bea, atowin pale spira bale spredikfal da, atowin tina atoa bale spredikfal bachayol. Others saw renewal. Very few attempted to understand it directly. Even fewer had ever managed to channel its power without being consumed by the attempt. The boy standing before them said he was one of those few. The elders saw the fire in him. They also saw something the fire was sitting on top of. A pride so comprehensive it was not exactly arrogance, because arrogance implies doubt that needs to be argued down. This was more structural than that. He had not yet encountered an experience that contradicted his belief in his own exceptionalism, and so the belief had never been tested and therefore had never been refined into anything more precise than its original form. I am different from the others, and different means better, and better means the ordinary rules do not apply to me in the ordinary ways. They accepted him. Then they gave him the dishes, not because they were being unkind, because the path to mastering something as volatile as the dragon's spirit began with the willingness to be small, to find in the smallest tasks the same quality of attention that the greatest feats required. A monk who could not sweep a floor with full presence could not channel fire with full control. These were not different things. They were the palongtad. Same thing at different scales. Qualis too. Lee Sin did not understand this. He watched his fellow students progress through formal instruction. He scrubbed floors. He scrubbed floors. He too washed dishes. He maintained, impeccably, the outward appearance of compliance, while his internal state moved steadily in the opposite direction. He was not learning patience. He was accumulating grievance, which is what happens when someone interprets the demand for humility as a personal slight rather than a universal requirement. The archives called to him in the specific way that forbidden things call to people who have already decided the rules do not apply to them. He found the ancient scrolls. He read them, he learned, in the way that it's self-teaching without a mahilo. Teacher produces learning comprehensively on the surface, with significant gaps in the places that a teacher would have known to fill. He studied the techniques for contacting the spirit realm. He practiced them in private. And then he decided to demonstrate what he had learned. Here is what demonstration was in Lee Sin's understanding at that point. Proof. Evidence that would correct the elders' misunderstanding of what he was, and reorganize the monastery's structure around the reality of his capabilities. He did not think of it as showing off. He thought of Tanki it as solving a categorization error. The demonstration was in a combat training session. He called the dragon's spirit. It came. What he had not understood, what the scrolls had described, But he had not yet learned the difference between understanding and knowing was that calling the dragon and commanding the dragon were not the same operation. The dragon spirit was not a tool. It was not waiting in the spirit realm for someone capable enough to unlock it and direct it. It was a presence with its own logic, its own temperature, its own relationship to the world that existed independently of what the person who had summoned it intended. He channeled it through a single kick. The master he was demonstrating for, experienced, accomplished, someone who had spent decades developing the precise relationship between discipline and power that made control possible, went down and did not get up. Not dead. Paralyzed. By a student who had not yet been taught the first formal lesson. The monastery expelled him. Kenjokis. Not in anger, exactly. In the specific sorrow of an institution that has seen what ungoverned gifts do and cannot, in good conscience, continue to provide a container for something that is not ready for the container. They sent him away. He went. Turo, Sundi, Huitnyalakwa. The years that followed were the education the monastery could not give him because he had not, Tushin, been ready to receive it. Hyalakwa, Hyalak. One Sundi Huitnyalak, Philak, Middly Philialak, Philak, Kyalak. Dan being ready to receive it. Hyalak, he traveled. He encountered the world in the specific way that people encounter the world when they have lost the structure that was organizing their life and have not yet found a replacement. Openly, chaotically, with a quality of attention that was no longer divided between what they believed they deserved and what was actually in front of them. He made mistakes. He made them without the safety net of an institution that had previously absorbed their consequences. He arrived eventually at a place where he met a man named Udir. Udir was a spirit walker, someone who had developed the capacity to channel the energies of multiple animal spirits, which was either the most powerful possible version of what Lee Sin had been trying to do, or a demonstration of its dangers, depending on which moment of Udir's life you observed. The two spirits inside Udir did not coexist peacefully. They competed. They surged against each other and against the man trying to hold them. Malad Shachi. Lee Sin recognized the problem immediately, not because he had solved it. He had not, because he was living in an adjacent version of it. He understood from the inside what it meant to have more power available than you had the foundation to control. They helped each other. Udir offered something that the monastery, for all its wisdom, had not been equipped to give, the company of someone who understood the specific texture of the problem rather than its solution. Lee Sin offered something back. Between them, they arrived at something neither would have found alone. Udir invited him home. Then the word came from Ionia. Noxus had arrived. The invasion that everyone had hoped would stop short, that every diplomatic effort had been oriented toward preventing, had not stopped. Noxian forces were moving through Ionia's provinces with the logic of an army that has decided its objective and is solving the tactical problems between here and there. Monks from across the region were retreating to the high temples, the fortified sanctuaries built into the mountain architecture of Ionia's interior, places where the density of spiritual practice had accumulated over centuries, into something that felt, to those sensitive to it, like the land itself was holding something back. Hirana was one of these. Ulwan Benkirier Rota. Lee Sin and Udir arrived to find it already surrounded. Ul-50 Rati, the Noxian soldiers had pushed through the outer defenses and were inside the wide halls when Rati. Lee Sin entered. He saw his former teachers, people who had expelled him, who had every reason to have written him off, falling to blades that had no understanding of what they were, ending. He saw the accumulated knowledge of centuries, the specific, irreplaceable record of Ionia's spiritual tradition, being dismantled by people who could not have known what they were, dismantling even if they had been told. He understood what had to happen. He also understood in the moment before he acted that he was not ready, that he had spent years trying to become ready and had not arrived, that the gap between what he had learned and what full control required was still real and significant. He called the dragon anyway. There is no language, in any of the traditions Lee Sin has studied before or since, that adequately describes what it is to be the vessel for something that is too large for the vessel. Not pain, exactly. Not power, exactly. Both and something beyond both, operating at a scale that the body registers, as everything at once. The fire came out of him in a wave. It hit the Noxians. It hit the hall. It did not stop moving when he wanted it to stop moving. He could feel each point of contact, the heat, the damage, the specific quality of force beyond what any careful strike could have produced, and he could not moderate it, could not redirect it, could not do anything except be the conduit for something that was using him the way a river uses a channel, completely, without reference to whether the channel preferred a different rate of low, condicrate away a river. The soldiers went down, the hall survived, the keepers of Hirana's knowledge survived. Condicrate away, Lee Sin was still standing when it was over, but the fire that had passed through him had not left him unchanged. His skin had been scorched from the inside by something that had moved through him faster than tissue could safely accommodate. His eyes had been in the path of it. When the light finally resolved into something he could make sense of, it resolved into nothing. The darkness was complete, permanent. He wrapped cloth around his eyes in the ruins of what the battle had left, and he made his way down the mountain on paths he had to feel rather than see, alone with the understanding that had arrived too late and the question of what to do with it now that it was here. The survivors did not let him leave alone. The scholars whose lives he had saved, the monks who had every reason to hold his history against him, met him at the base of the mountain. They had deliberated among themselves about what the moment required. The conclusion they had reached was not forgiveness exactly. The past did not change, but something more pragmatic. Here was someone who had just demonstrated that the dragon's power, in the hands of someone genuinely committed to the practice, could be brought to bear in the defense of what Ionia held most sacred. The humility he had needed to acquire before they could teach him, he had now acquired. Not the past it dies, through instruction, through fire. They offered him a path back. He accepted. Not because he had resolved anything. The eye sockets beneath the cloth were a daily reminder that resolution was not the same as completion, but because the work that needed doing was real, and the capacity to do it was real, and the gap between them was something he had proven he could close through effort rather than simply through waiting. He rebuilt alongside them. He learned, this time, with the quality of attention that can only be produced by someone who has already experienced what insufficient attention costs. He practiced the dragon's techniques not as demonstration but as discipline. The same quality of presence he had refused to bring to the dishes and the floors, now available because he had understood, at last and at great cost, that it was not optional. Udir returned when the reconstruction was finished. Lee Sin remains. He understands now that what is coming for Ionia is not finished, that the Noxian withdrawal was a pause rather than a conclusion, and that the forces gathering at the edges of the world will require everything he can become and possibly more. He meditates on this. He continues the Bu-E practice. He trains on the mountain paths he now knows by touch better than he ever knew them, by sight. The dragon is still inside him. They are learning to understand each other, Kugbahem. Not fully, perhaps never fully, but further each day than the day before. Pachtachata. That is what the path is. Not arrival, but continuous movement towards something that keeps revealing new distance as you approach. He knows this now. He is, finally, ready to know it. If this story reached you, subscribe. Every week, the full lore of a League of Legends champion. told the way it was meant to be heard.